Good morning and welcome to Disrupting the Wealth Gap Part 4, your money strategy, setting and achieving short and long-term financial goals. Joining me this morning is Monica Hine. She is a financial advisor from Prudential. She was awarded the Top Financial Advisor Award for D-Free in the nation in 2019. Monica, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Brittany, I am so thrilled and honored.
We are honored to have you, and especially to have you share your expertise with us and everyone who's watching today. So thank you. I'm excited about today because I know it's important really for all of us to set and achieve financial goals, whether someone is trying to buy a house or if they're trying to save for retirement or even save to pay off those student loans. All of us really need to take the time to sit down, assess where we are, and save. And another thing is you don't know when a crisis is going to hit, like the pandemic that we all went into in 2020. So it's important to create a goal and a strategy to try to create a stable financial future. So thank you. As we begin, do you mind letting us know when someone wants to create a short-term financial goal, what's one of the first things that they should do?
Okay, so Brittany, I'm going to ask for just a second to ask everyone who is participating to take 10 seconds, maybe they close their eyes and think about what your goal is, okay? Just real quickly, first thing on your mind, what is your financial goal? Okay, so now I'm going to circle back to answer your question. So short-term goals are those necessary steps that you make in small increments to help you achieve your long-term goals. Now, I'm going to go back and ask people, did you define your goal? Was it a short-term goal or was it a long-term goal? If it was a long-term goal, how are you going to get there? And the answer is short-term goal. So that's the importance to me of short-term and long-term goals. You need one to achieve the other. So if you have a long-term goal, you don't have the short-term goals, you're not going to get there. If you have short-term goals and you don't have a long-term goal, how do you know you've ever achieved it? So do you say that, hey, I'm successful because I have X, Y, Z? Well, if you didn't plan it, you're just there and you didn't really take control of it. Life has taken control of you. So it's important to set those goals.
So then if someone is creating a short-term goal, is it something that they can achieve in 6 months or in a year? Can you help describe and define what a short-term goal is?
I'm glad you asked me that, Brittany. I think we had kind of talked about this a little bit. I can't tell people that a short-term goal is 1 week or 1 day or 1 month or 1 year. Everyone who I talk with, you included, is in a different place in life. Tomorrow you'll be in a different place than you were today. So I can't say that a short-term goal should be a week or a month or a year. So I think that it's extremely important for you as an individual to determine exactly where you are. Because if you don't know where you are, you don't know how to address your long-term goals. So say, for example, you're in high school, or in high school is not too soon to start, or you're in college, or maybe you're a 20-something. Your goals, short-range goals might be to get a job or to graduate from school. And those are financial goals. Those are achievable things. But if you're a little bit older, you've already achieved that. So you wouldn't start in the same place. Someone who might be in their 20s or 30s might say, hey, my goal is to achieve $10,000. Well, when you're in high school, $10,000 sounds like a long-term goal. But when you are, 40-something or 50-something, you better have a whole lot more saved than that, because one day, we'll talk about this, one day you're going to meet the old version of you and you're going to have this conversation and you want to say, hey, young Brittany, thank you so much for taking care of old me, because you knew I was coming, and you need to to think about the old version of you. And I'm going to meet the old Monica too. And I'm not the old Monica yet, but in order to take those steps, it's important to have incremental successes. And that's really what a short-term goal is to me. You set an achievable goal, you set a deadline, because we'll talk about D. Free and Dr. DeForest Soares, who was the founder. He, and I quote him quite frequently, but he says a goal without a deadline is just a dream. So you need to have short-term goals with specific time frames, so you can say, hey, I wanted to save $500, before the end of the year. And hey, I did that. Or I wanted to save, $20,000 a year, until I reach, $200,000 or something like that. So whatever your goal is, it needs to be broken up in increments, because if you only have that long-term goal, you're not going to reach it. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to be, it's like, hey, I'm never going to get there. It seems insurmountable. What do they say? How do you eat an elephant? Like it's one teaspoon, one fork spoon at a time. Not that you want to eat an elephant, but
I know what you mean, though. Yeah. I know. And, I remember Dr. Soares always saying that growing up, I was in his church, and I remember the sermon.
Serious?
Yes.
Wow.
And there was the sermon. He called it Set the Timer. And I was young. Right. And I just remember him always saying, set the timer. And it has stuck with me throughout my life. Right. That if I don't set a deadline for something, then, I'm just meandering through life and not necessarily getting to that that destination where I want to get. So I appreciate you saying that. I remember him always saying that.
So you may have heard the term time value of money. So let's take a hypothetical situation. I'm going to take 3 different people. Each one of them is going to invest $10,000. Okay, so we're going to see what that $10,000 does for them as they wait until, and the deadline for all 3 people is 60 years old. Okay, so the first person is 50 years old. They take $10,000, and let's say that they get a return of 5%. Everybody's going to get a return of 5%. So that 50-year-old will get $16,288. And that's just by starting now, putting it in an investment. It's not going to make that kind of money in a bank, but a 5% is, it's a modest return, but they would get $16,288. Now, that same $10,000 for a 40-year-old. Now they have 20 years to invest. They still that same $10,000, but they started earlier, right? So in 20 years, that would be $26,532. And all they did was start at 40. Now you say, hey, you might be 40. It's like, it's not too late. But what about that 20-year-old? Say that you're fortunate enough at 20 years old to have $10,000 to invest. You're not dropping another dime in there. You're just investing it, getting a consistent 5% return on your investment. By the time you reach 60 years old, you have accumulated $70,399. Now, let's talk about that 20-year-old and short-term goals. They might not have that $10,000, but how do you get $10,000? You set short-term goals and you save and you accumulate that. So
it's really beautiful to see how the money can compound over time, which really underscores how important it is for someone to start when they're young. So I appreciate you really showing us that.
Okay.
Well, right now we're going to take a look at how one executive had $100,000 in credit card debt, but she had a moment where she realized how much money she was in debt, and she was able to pay it off in 3 years. Let's take a look. We are getting ready to speak with Lynnette Calfani-Cox, the money coach, personal finance expert, author of numerous books, including the New York Times best-selling book, Zero Debt, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. She is also a radio and television personality. Lynnette, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I was looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, thank you. Your story is really going to help so many people. I know for myself, just watching videos of you on YouTube, I'm like, I was so inspired personally. So thank you for just taking a few minutes. In your book, Zero Debt, you described that you had $100,000 in debt. Can you walk us through your strategy in regards to first recognizing that you needed to pay the debt down, and then what was your strategy to do it?
So I got into debt mainly because I was kind of a classic overspender. If I saw something and I wanted it, I just went on and charged it without really giving a lot of thought to how I was going to pay off those bills. And so it didn't matter whether it was like electronics, clothes, trips, travel and vacation. Again, I was an overspender. Um, Now I know, having worked as a money coach, the past 18 years, that most folks kind of get into trouble because they are either in that overspending category, or they're kind of poor money managers, or a lot of them have had some kind of difficulties, what I call the dreaded D's: downsizing, a divorce in the family, disability, disease, that kind of stuff, something that could throw their finances out of whack. I ultimately actually did go through a lot of dreaded D's. I was downsized from my six-figure job, six-figure income job. I went through a divorce. But I can't say that all of that put me into debt. No, it was just me spending too much money. So ultimately what I did to start kind of digging myself out of debt, and honestly, I didn't have a plan at the time. It wasn't like, oh, let me come up with this master strategy. I started doing a lot of things right, and I started building upon my successes. So I stopped, for example, paying minimum payments, because that's really just a trap. Minimum payments now in the short run really just mean maximum payments in the long run. So I started doubling and tripling my minimum payments, or paying just more, something extra anytime that I could. And I also learned, frankly, that most banks, credit unions, financial institutions that have extended you credit, that have given you a credit card, they usually only ask you to pay about 1 to 2% of the outstanding balance. And so, yeah, you're going to be making those payments all the time, and you're going to stay in debt month after month, year after year, if you're just making minimum payments. So I got out of that trap. And that was one thing that helped me to start knocking out my debts. I also used windfalls of every kind that I received. So what's a windfall? A windfall is really just some kind of a extra, quote unquote, money. I know some people are gonna be like, girl, I don't have anything extra, okay? But I think that we really all do get sort of bonus funds, if you will. It could be holiday money. It could be gift money that somebody gives you. It could be auntie or uncle that give you some money for your birthday. It could be an inheritance check you get. It could be life insurance proceeds you receive if somebody, a relative passes away and you receive some money. It could be a bonus on the job that you get, some year-end bonus or otherwise. It could be a raise that you get from your employer, or it could be something like a tax refund check, which, 75% of all Americans get a tax refund check. And they're usually about $3,000 or so. Thus, I started taking all the little extras that I got, tax refund check, bonuses from my job, etc., and socking it towards my credit card debt. And you'd be surprised if you really start taking those funds that you kind of weren't necessarily counting on or expecting, or, it just seems like a little extra. And by extra, I mean just outside of your normal paycheck. If you take that money and put it towards the debt, you're not going to regret it later that you chipped away at those obligations and started to make yourself become more debt free. I also did things like negotiating with my creditors. So at the time, I was able to negotiate down all of my credit card interest rates. Nothing was above like 4.9%. So I had multiple credit cards at 0%. I had some at 2.9%. And yes, I had some at 4.9%. Long story short, the reason I was able to negotiate and get on the phone and say, listen, I'm going to switch and go to this other credit card company. Can you match or beat this offer that I've received in the mail, or this other offer to get a lower interest rate? The banks, the credit unions, the credit card issuers, they don't want to lose your business right, as a customer. So if you've been a good paying customer, and I was a good paying customer, they really liked me. I was good because I was paying minimum payments all the time. They were making money off of me. But I was consistent and I never had any late payments or anything of that nature. So I started not only increasing the minimum payments, using the windfalls, but I also started doing things like negotiating and getting on that phone and working the phones to say, listen, I'm trying to get out of debt here. I want to reduce my obligations. I see my current interest rate is, 12.9%. And these days, more like 16%, average. I have another offer. I like you because I've been a customer for X number of years and I want to stick with you. However, can you match or beat this other offer? And I got a lot of yeses. So you'd be surprised at how many yeses you can get just by negotiating. In fact, a company called Synergistics, they did a research study around this. They found that, sure enough, 3 out of 4 customers who call up their credit card companies and ask for a lower rate actually get it right on the spot. So that's kind of like yours for the asking.
Wow, that's a great tip for many people, because I don't think most people think that they can call up and ask for an actual lower rate and then get it on top of that. Would you always recommend for someone to have in hand another offer at a lower rate?
It's a good thing because it provides you a little bit of leverage there. And I don't like to tell people to lie. I never tell anybody to lie. I tell people to be honest, but just be candid with your creditors. And so certainly you can probably open your mailbox, open your email inbox as well. And you're probably kind of flooded with credit card offers. Banks actually send out billions, with a B, not millions, billions of credit card offers every single year. So chances are you got something that somebody has pitched you on. You might have just thought about it as junk mail, but you know what? You might want to take a look at one of those offers and see whether or not it's more competitive than the interest rate that you're currently carrying. And if so, yes, use it as a form of leverage, as a negotiating point to honestly and correctly and accurately say, listen, I'm currently paying X. This other company over here is offering me X minus 5%. Can you match or beat that offer? That's the language basically that you want to use.
Well said. That's a great tip. Thank you. So I wanted to ask you, when you noticed that your credit card debt was increasing over time, what was it that said to you, okay, now it's time to really start tackling it to get it down to zero?
Girl, it was embarrassment. It was it was like, ooh, getting declined one too many times when I was maxed out. I've shared this story with, some other audiences. I was the person who would treat also, maybe it's my girlfriend's going out or whatever, or just multiple parties. And we're at a restaurant, for example. And obviously this was way, pre-pandemic, but I got the bill, right? Oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. I'm covering everybody. And then I'm seeing, like, to me at least, the waiter or waitress walking back kind of like, ooh, in slow motion with that bill, with that tab. And I'm worried and I'm practically praying like, Lord, please don't let my credit card get declined and let me get embarrassed up in here. So,
I get, so you said, okay, now it's time after that. I totally understand.
Once or twice that did happen to me. And probably even not more in the group setting, but just, at the retail counter, shopping, buying something or whatever. So long story short, again, because I know I will talk, but I really got to the point where all of my credit cards were maxed out. They were sort of at their limits and I couldn't get new forms of credit. So now, you have to have, so many cards to have $100,000 worth of debt. And I think at the time, I want to say, I can't remember if it was 8 or 10 or something, more than I needed credit cards. But no, my creditors would not increase my lines of credit anymore. And I was maxed out, so I couldn't keep spending at that same level. So I was like, okay, girl, you got to stop. It's time for a change here. You need to do something different. And then that's really, honestly, if I'm candid, the impetus that pushed me into saying, okay, let me start tackling this debt and knock out. Let me even add it up and see what do I have going on here? And woo, when I added it up, it was not a pretty picture.
Oh,
So,
but you know what I love though about your story is that you didn't let it hinder you. Instead, it motivated you and you were able to create a New York Times bestseller out of it, which I absolutely love. So for the people who are watching at home, so you realize you have this debt, you need to pay it down. You said, okay, let me start making payments. You made additional payments whenever you could. And then I think, you know, when it comes to emotionally, I know it's a lot when people are dealing with debt. It really feels burdensome. How did you encourage yourself to continue going to pay down the debt?
well, I saw results and quickly. And this is something that I would frankly kind of recommend to anybody else who's thinking about, how they're going to get started, how they're going to plan their own little debt payoff. I think that unfortunately, all too often we've gotten the message that there's only one way to pay off debt. And it's simply not true. Not only is it incorrect, it's harmful financially and emotionally and otherwise to people. And what is this one way? Everybody says pay off your high interest rate credit card debt. Well, of course, from a just purely mathematical standpoint, you don't want to be paying extra interest and finance charges on your debts. And so, yes, you want to knock down high interest rate debt. But what I'm suggesting is that most people need to actually pick their area of pain in order to decide their debt payoff strategy. And for me, it wasn't having high interest rates because I didn't have high interest rates. I was able to negotiate and get them down low and some of them were 0%.
Mhm.
So really what I found is that when you're looking at how to pay off the debts, you want to think about things like, am I really bothered by high interest rates? If so, sure, attack those cards that have like incredibly high interest rates.
Mhm.
If you're really bothered by having, say, high dollar balances, then you want to attack the cards that have the highest dollar balances, regardless of what the interest rate is. Or if you're really bothered by just feeling like everything is out of control, you have way too many cards, you might have 10, 15, 20 credit cards, and some of them might have $400 on it here, $250 on this one, $1,000 on that one, $5,000 on this one. Really, if you have like way too many cards and you need to get it kind of under control to better manage it, then you want to pick the cards with the lowest dollar balance first and start attacking those cards and pay that off. So then you can take the money that you would have been spending on that low dollar balance card and then apply it to the next card, kind of snowballing the debt payoff. So again, knowing the strategies is helpful, but also it's important to not fall into sort of one size fits all advice, which is why, again, now having been a money coach for 18 years, having paid off my own debts and having seen what's really worked, honestly, for a lot of folks, the reason or one of the reasons why they can't sort of get out of debt is that we keep telling them pay off the high interest rate credit card debt. And then they start to do that. If they pay $200, $300, $400 a month, they're only seeing their balances go down by a tiny little sliver. And then that's discouraging to them.
Mhm.
So I didn't have that issue. Again, I started attacking the cards that had the high dollar balance. And so when I saw the balances declining, it was motivating to me to keep on the debt payoff plan.
I love that. I love that. That was great advice. So what did you do then when you officially paid off your $100,000 in credit card debt?
Well, I ended up writing about it. I ended up creating this New York Times bestseller. It wasn't my plan. um, I certainly didn't go woohoo, celebrate. Now let me go spend. I was like, oh, I did this. I should tell other people how to do it, And so when I wrote Zero Debt, I really wrote it as a 30-day action plan to help people to jumpstart their debt payoff strategies and their overall plan. Because I know that when you're in debt, you just feel kind of overwhelmed. And a lot of times people are like, okay, just tell me the first step. Like day one, what should I do? So that's literally how I wrote Zero Debt, to say day one, do this one step, just one thing. Day two, do this next step, one thing. Day three, do this. And so, you kind of handhold people through the process. And then it is easier for them to follow along, frankly. And yes, they start to see the results and they're like, oh, wow, okay, I can do this. And when you don't discourage them or give them unrealistic goals or strategies or things that seem a little far-fetched, then they can follow along and say, okay, you know what? Yeah, if she can get out of debt, I can do it too.
Yes, yes. So what additional tips then would you leave for people who are watching? What tips would you give them as they, go forward and try to create short and long-term strategies for their money?
I guess I would say I would focus on three things, whether it's short or long term. One is prioritize. You absolutely have to prioritize your debt repayments. Now, I outlined like specifically for credit card debt, three different ways that you could pay it off: by focusing on high interest rates, if that's what's bothering you, or high dollar balances, or low dollar balances. But what I'm talking about here is prioritizing the type of debt that you want to get rid of. So some folks who are older, who are, say, 55, 60 plus, they might be thinking like, I don't want a mortgage in retirement. I want to make sure that my house is paid off. And for them, that might be the priority. Somebody who's a 22-year-old out of college might be like, whoo, oh my gosh, I got 30,000 in student loans. But I just got a great job. And you know what? I want to knock out this college debt as quickly as I can. So they might be more interested in focusing on the student loan obligations and getting rid of those. Gen Xers like myself, or millennials who are sort of in that 30-ish range, who maybe have kids, who have, bought a first house and they're furnishing the house or whatever, and maybe they had credit card bills, then yeah, you might think that the credit card debts are the ones that you want to really most quickly knock out. So don't believe that paying off debt is mutually exclusive to doing other things. Like, you can and should pay off your debt and save a little bit. You can and should pay off your debt and invest a little bit, but you will have to prioritize. You don't have an infinite amount of money, so you will have to allocate those resources and decide, what am I going to sort of focus on most, and where am I going to put like most of the money? Is most of it going to go first towards the debt elimination? And in a lot of cases, that makes sense. But I don't want people to do that at the sacrifice of longer term things like planning for retirement and investing. And if you just said, oh my God, it's going to take me 3 years to, knock out all my debt, just as an example, I don't want you to wait 3 years to start investing. So you might say, okay, here I have, $250 a month. I'm going to put, $150 towards my debt payoff and $100 towards my 401k or my 403b plan at work, so I can be investing something towards my retirement. So you do have to think about prioritizing and including in your strategy your short, medium, and long range goals. So, Proverbs 13:22 talks about essentially a wise man or a good man leaving an inheritance for his kids' kids, for his children's children. And so I think that verse is instructive because it does remind us to have of the wisdom and the benefits of that longer range thinking. It's very difficult to do, I'm gonna be honest, for most folks, because people are like, I have bills to pay today. I got the mortgage, I have, utility bills, I got a car note, I got credit cards, I have food to pay, I got to think about my kids. And there's all of this stuff for today that makes it more challenging to prepare for tomorrow. But really, if you want to plan wisely, you really do want to think about future you and about your kids. If you really want to go next level, tap into that biblical wisdom and take it to your kids' kids.
Thank you so much for sharing your advice. I can't even tell you how much of an inspiration you are. I know for many people who are watching, they You know, a lot of people struggle with debt, whether it's student loan debt or their mortgage or their credit cards. And to watch how you've been able to, as you said, you took those D's that took place in your life. Everybody goes through many different things, and you were able to turn it around. You had that $40,000 in student loan debt. You had the $100,000 in credit card loans. It didn't stop you, and look at you today. And I thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. It's beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. My pleasure to join you.
That was valuable information that we just received from Lynnette. Monica, one thing that I absolutely love about Lynnette's story is that she was able to take a problem, such as her having $100,000 in debt, and then really turn it into something, like turned her lemons into lemonade. She turned it into a New York Times best-selling book. I absolutely love that about her story.
It's like a lemon meringue pie. That's like,
yes, yes, she really,
right,
wow.
right.
And in the piece, I asked her, you know, how did she know that it was time to make an adjustment? And she said she realized it when all of a sudden she couldn't get any more lines of credit. And if her credit card was being declined, then she said, okay, now it's time to, as the D-free steps are, address the problem, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, you know, you had mentioned that I am a D-free facilitator, I'll put it that way. And so I have graduated more than 100 people from D-free. So, and I love the program. And quite frequently in my personal practice as a financial advisor, I frequently reference it. And Lynnette did not go from $100,000 in debt to debt-free without a plan. So she had to have small incremental plans. And whether she realized it or not, she did. She had, you know, like, well, I'm going to take care of my credit card debt. The people who are listening might not be, it might not be credit card debt. It might be, you know, saving for college education for their children. It might be trying to buy a house, but you need to have those incremental steps. But I think it's extremely important for you to know where you are. So the first 3 steps of Be Free really, I think, are the most important steps of Be Free. And in anybody's situation, whether I'm talking to millionaires who are sitting across the desk from me, or people who, you know, have achieved, you know, financial, what they might feel secure, everyone can take it up a step. I don't care if you're Oprah Winfrey, you can take it up another notch, right? So the first 3 steps of Be Free is admit the problem. So, you know, Lynnette had a credit card, a lot of credit card debt. And the problem really was not the debt, it was her spending habits, right? So you have to admit the problem. Where are you? And you cannot lie to yourself. You cannot lie to yourself. You can, you know, verbalize whatever you want to, but the truth is the truth, right? So then you have to address the mess. And then addressing the mess is really setting those short-term goals. Okay, so I admit that I have $30,000 worth of credit card debts or $30,000 worth of student loans or whatever, okay? That is the mess. And I'm going to address the mess by taking this step, this step, this step. And she talked about, you know, how she paid down credit cards. You can use that same strategy to build wealth. So, and something else she said that was extremely important, I think, is when she was talking about there are more ways than one to attack a problem. So figure out what the situation is. So admit the problem, address the mess, and that is, you know, open your credit cards bills, put everything down that you spend. And, you know, like I'd have one of the exercises in Deep Free is to keep a diary of everything that you do for a month. You know, and I tell people, it's like if you give a homeless person a dime, it goes in that book. So you can identify your spending leaks. You really, really, really have to address the psychological aspect of your spending habits. And then the third step is adjust the attitude. Okay, so I have an attitude because it's like, it's not my fault because my husband did X, Y, Z, or, you know, like, I can't help it that my kids need shoes, or I can't help it that, you know, I bought too much stuff for Christmas. So you have to adjust the attitude. You know, you figured out where you are, You know what the problem is. So adjust the attitude. It's like, I'm going to take care of this for myself because no one else is responsible for you but yourself. And, adjust the attitude and do it. You just have to do it, And so those short-term goals give you a pat on the back. You need those to say, hey, this first month I'm going to address the mess. So say you did that. And that's a financial goal. Now I know exactly where I stand financially. Your net worth. She was talking about what is net worth. It's not just all of the assets that you have. It's not your bank account. It's not the house you have. You might have a mortgage on that house. So you have to include the debts as well. So the assets minus the debts or the liabilities equals your net worth. I know people who make a lot of money, but if you spend more than you make, you are broke.
Yes, there is one D-free family, and they both described how they're both really successful. One of them has their own business. They're also a professor. The wife, she is a lawyer, and they were both saying that they have all of this money coming in, but yet they noticed they still had a large amount of debt. And so they took it upon themselves to really do these 3 steps that you mentioned. They went through the D-Free Academy, and then they really tried to admit what their problem was, and then find a way to ensure that they decreased their debt. So then really over a series of years, they were able to pay off more than $300,000 in debt together. So they really did a great job.
Wow. Yeah. So little steps, those are the short-term goals that lead into the mid, range goals, which lead into the long range goals. And then, it's a series of your life is a series of short range goals, and you accomplish those. And, those original goals that you think were long-term, when you get to that long-term goal, you start again and you set new, higher, loftier goals, right?
You're right. You absolutely do. And speaking of larger goals, our next guest is someone who was able to take his goal of creating a business and then able to compound that over time to create multiple enterprises. And then he was able to use the income from that in order to fund his financial goals. So let's take a look at his story. Today, we are joined by Dr. Randall Pinkett. He is the first African-American winner of NBC's acclaimed reality TV show, The Apprentice. In addition, he is the founder, chairman, and CEO of his 5th venture, BCT Partners, a multi-million-dollar research, consulting, training, technology, and analytics firm headquartered in Newark, New Jersey. Dr. Pinkett is also the author of multiple books, including Campus CEO, The Student Entrepreneur's Guide to Launching a Multi-Million-Dollar Business, and No Money Down CEO, How to Start Your Dream Business with Little or No Cash. And one more thing I wanted to add, this year, he is the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year 2021 in New Jersey. I love it all. Good morning, Dr. Pinkett. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Brittany. Thank you for having me on the program, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Yes. So today's segment is about creating short and long-term financial goals. And in your book, Campus CEO and No Money Down CEO, you talk about people creating enterprises and then using the revenue from those businesses to fund their financial goals. So ultimately, the goal is for people to use similar tactics for themselves in their own lives. So to begin, do you mind describing what inspired you to start a business when you were in college?
I love the question. And I'll lead in by saying this. If you asked me when I started college where I saw myself when I graduated college, the answer was working in corporate America. I studied engineering, and that's not a bad answer to say you want to work in corporate America at the end of your years in college. But my second year at Rutgers, a childhood friend of mine who I grew up with, and coincidentally, he also went to Rutgers and was 2 years ahead of me. Wayne Abbott started a business when he was a student selling T-shirts. And to make a long story short, when I saw Wayne selling T-shirts at the age of 20 on a college campus, making money, running a business, I said, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And I thought back to my years growing up where I sold lemonade, I sold candy. I tried to sell my toys to other kids in my neighborhood, even though they had no money. So They were broke. I was broke. No toys got sold. And my mom found out and said, boy, you can't sell the toys. I bought the toys. They said, if you're going to sell the toys, give me a cut. I said, no. And she said, well, then shut down your toy store. So I thought back on all those years growing up where I was doing entrepreneurial things, but here's the pivot or the point. Until I saw someone running a business that I could relate to who looked like me, I never even fathomed that I could own my own business. It was never part of my upbringing. My upbringing was go get a job. That's why I said, I'm going to go work in corporate America. But Wayne completely transformed my trajectory. And I went from imagining myself working for someone else to having people work for me. And it was life-changing what Wayne did for me at Rutgers. That's how I ended up starting a business in college.
That is so cool. So when you initially began your first business, did you know what you wanted it to be in? I think you sold, am I correct, cassettes, right?
You got it. Yeah, that dates me. Cassette tapes and compact discs. I was one of the fundamental principles of entrepreneurship is, kind of tap into your passion. For a number of reasons. It gives you the wherewithal to overcome the challenges. It's likely something that you'll bring the right energy and the right spirit to bring to fruition. And so I was a big music fan. And so I said, looking around campus, there's nowhere you can buy music. And so we opened up a music store in our dorm. We found a wholesaler in Philadelphia who could overnight CDs and tapes to us. So we would take an order on Monday in the dining hall. And then the next day we would come back and we would take their money too. We would take the order, take their money, and then we would place the order, get it the next day, and then deliver it to them in the dining hall. It was like $8 to buy, $12 to sell. So we made $4 on every CD. And the other thing I'll say real quick is my partners and I, Lawrence, Jeffrey, Dallas, we also imagined that we could use the proceeds to do community service. So the money we were making off the compact disc sales, we were using it to fund high school outreach to urban and inner city schools to do giveaways and to pay for gas and the like to encourage them to go to college. And to make a long story short, we soon realized we could actually make money off of those presentations by charging the schools because we were that good at the presentations and they were giving us like $500 per presentation. So we said, forget the compact disc. Let's go do the presentations. We can make more money per presentation than selling like 500 CDs. So that's how we ended up getting into the educational services business as the second business that we started across the four of us.
I love that whole thing. That's so amazing. So when you initially started, did you intend for the revenue from that to be able to help you get out of college with no debt?
So I'm going to keep it real with you, Brittany. Probably the first thing we wanted to do was just take a young lady on a date someplace other than fast food.
I'm glad you're keeping it real.
No, we can take her to Red Lobster.
Love that.
So that was probably one of our primary motivations. But having said that, you know as well as I do that oftentimes when you're in college, you're broke. And so this opportunity to earn money while we were studying, not through a part-time job, but through running a business was also appealing to us because we were all first-generation entrepreneurs. None of us had anyone in our families who were full-time business owners. And so as we saw the opportunity to build wealth, to create income, we also realized that could offset the costs we were already incurring for books, for meals, for, those of us that had cars, gas in the car, maintenance, take your pick. So it ended up being a way of generating income that could also help fund our education at the same time. So it worked out wonderfully.
I love this. It's beautiful how you have this seed and it started into something, and from each step it grew into something bigger, because then after all of that, you even created your books, which is amazing. And then you put it into a form so that other people could use it. So I love the whole thing. And you mentioned earlier, long story short, I wanted to tell you, feel free to explain as much as you'd like. You are just fine.
All right.
So For someone who's at home and they're watching and say they're in high school or they're in college and they're thinking that they want to do the same thing, what would you say to them if they need to create a short or long-term goal to begin a business?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is let's dispel the myths of what it means to go into business. And these are myths that I harbored when we started our first business back in college. The first myth is that you have to have, the research tells us that 50% of businesses start with $20,000 or less. And I should caveat that. I'm not talking about any business. I'm talking about studies of the fastest growing businesses. When you study the fastest growing businesses and ask them, how much did you start with? Half of them started with $20,000 or less. And 1 out of 10 of the fastest growing businesses started with $1,000 or less. And we were in the category of or less because we started with nothing, absolutely nothing. So that's the first myth to dispel. The second myth is that you have to have the money. Now, I think it's 80% of startup capital for a business comes from the founders. About 80 or 70% of it come from the founders. But again, if we combine that with the reality that you don't have to have a lot, we're talking about $1,000 or less. I mean, even when we were in college, we could have applied and gotten a credit card and borrowed $1,000 if we really needed access to that level of capital. So I want to paint a picture for folks that while the money often does come from the founders, don't believe that you have to have a lot. Certain businesses certainly require high capital investment. You can't start a manufacturing business of cars, out of your dorm. You just can't pull that off. You need some capital. But for service-oriented businesses or tech businesses where you might be the capital, the human capital, you can pull it off. Facebook did it. I mean, we can go back to some other stories. So that was my first thing. But then in terms of advice, as far as starting a business, you can probably intuit what I'm about to say from my story. Do not go it alone. This is not for the faint of heart, for the solopreneur. The team is often overlooked in the annals of entrepreneurial success. Like we think about Bill Gates, we think about Oprah Winfrey, we think about Steve Jobs. Like they're the prototypical, entrepreneur leader. But the fact is, Oprah had a guy named Jeff Jacobs, who most people don't know. Steve Jobs had Steve Wozniak. Bill Gates had Paul Allen. Like there was a team that was the metaphor, even though the individual might get all the headlines. And so I see far too many entrepreneurs trying to go it by themselves. And I had 3 partners and it was hard for us. So I can imagine what it's like to go at it as an individual. So my advice would be find some like-minded and like-hearted individuals who are complementary to your skill set, but harmonious with your value set, that you can go into this thing together.
Well said. I absolutely loved all of that. So then I guess the other part of it is when you start making money, ensuring that you have your finances in order so that you can continue to build upon your successes, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There are some fundamental principles of money management that undergird entrepreneurial success, meaning willingness to sacrifice in the short term for a goal in the long term. Mm-hmm. Like to not buy the fancy set of sneakers or outfit because the money that you'd spend on that could be used to invest in something that could get you a greater return in the long term. Here's another one is, simple principles: spending less than you earn. Not borrowing against debt instruments unless there is an idea of good debt. Student loan is good debt because that's an investment. Mm-hmm. Borrowing for a house is good debt because it's an investment. Borrowing to buy the outfit is not a good investment. So, and then lastly is, as a matter of principle, is making sure that you are retaining earnings as a way of building wealth. So when we were early in the stage of our business and we were making money, the four of us agreed, we're not going to pull money out of the business because right now we are already constrained in our resources. The business needs those resources to grow. So we're not going to pay ourselves dividends. We're not going to pay ourselves, bonuses. We're taking every dollar, we're going to reinvest it because we believe that the best bet we can make is bet on ourselves. So we put the money back in and we put it back in and people are like, yo, you're not actually making money. No, we're making money. We're not taking money out. And as the business grew and had those scarce resources to be able to invest in a marketing campaign and hiring an admin assistant and getting an office space, that was the fuel to the fire of the growth of the company. Had we pulled the money out, we would have been compromising the company's ability to grow, and we would have not made it, if not made it as fast as we did.
Now, I have one more question about this in regards to the team that you end up acquiring, because I know a lot of people before they go into business, they're always worried about the finances and making sure that they are able to get the books in order. Would you recommend for someone then in that core team? I know you have the four of you who began from college and started your business together. Would you recommend then having one person whose sole responsibility is the finances, or do you outsource out and get someone to do your finances?
First of all, you have to have someone at the table that understands the numbers. Mm-hmm. That's one of the prime reasons why professional athletes go broke, is because they don't understand the numbers. And as a result of that, they can't provide their own oversight of their finances, and things then go awry. So I think somebody has to have command of the numbers. Somebody trusted has to have command of the numbers. And so ideally it would come from the team, but let's just assume that it's not on the team. It can be outsourced, but I would absolutely start asking around for referrals and recommendations of someone that someone else has found to be a trusted advisor on matters of financial management. And then from there, it's, again, some simple principles. Always sign your checks. Don't leave that to somebody else. That's how problems step in. And make sure that we're all on the same page as far as the accounting, to make certain that we're managing the business around profitability. Sometimes that often gets lost in the mix, where we're not generating the right reports with the right cadence and frequency to know if and where we're making money and where we're not, so that we can course correct in real time.
Thank you. Okay, so we talked about starting a business. Now let's say someone is in the process and they're watching this and they've started. They're in the middle of really trying to get their business to grow, and they feel deflated, or they're discouraged because it's not going as they'd like for it to, or they're not getting the revenue that they had hoped to get. What would be your words of encouragement for them?
So it's a great question, because it's one of the hardest crossroads for an entrepreneur. Is, when do I throw in the towel? Now, what society and the motivational speakers will tell you is just keep going at it. Keep working hard, keep digging in your heels, and that's not bad advice. But let's keep it real. Not every person is going to succeed at every business. And part of the journey of entrepreneurship is learning from failure, accepting failure, and not seeing that as a badge of shame, but a badge of honor and opportunity to learn and grow. Some of the most successful examples in business are riddled with failure. And I'll give you two quick examples. WD-40, which most people know as a lubricant. WD-40 was founded by a team that was trying to create the best lubricant. And the way that you lubricate things is by displacing water. When water is there, rust forms. When you displace water, rust doesn't have the opportunity to form. And so WD-40 stands for water displacement perfected on the 40th try. Another example, Formula 409. Formula 409, you got to see where I'm going here. Formula 409 got its name from persistence. It took them 409 formulas to get it right. Yeah, 409. Yeah, there you go. That's the reaction I had. I mean, I would have given up on the 10th formula. I'd have given up on the 408th formula. I'd have thrown in the towel, right? So the point here is there's certain, look at Kathy Hughes. I think she got rejected 100 times for a bank loan. Look at Howard Schultz, founder of Starbucks. I think he got rejected like 200 times for a loan for Starbucks. So there's certainly a lesson in the spirit here that says, keep going at it. But here's my guiding principle. Ask yourself the question, do I see myself gaining momentum? To me, entrepreneurship and business is about kind of forward momentum. Like I'm getting traction with customers. I'm seeing a positive response from the marketplace. I see people attracted to what I'm doing who want to be a part of my team. Like that's forward momentum. But if you're in the same place 6 months later or 12 months later, nobody wanted to join your team. You're not getting traction with clients. Revenue is kind of flat or it's declining. You got to ask yourself the question, is this the time to pivot? Because you can keep running up against that wall and feel like, no, like dogged determination is going to get me through. But guess what? There are failures after failures after failures for people who stayed in too long, too wrong, and ended up in debt or worse. So it's more an art than a science of knowing when to make the call. But I believe you got to trust your gut, and you got to look around and ask the tough question: Am I getting some measure of momentum? Am I stagnant or am I regressing? And if it's the latter two, it might be time to pivot into something else.
Okay, great advice all the way through. Before we close out, is there anything else that you would like to provide people with in regards to information about creating short or long-term business goals that can ultimately help fund their financial goals?
I would just offer this up. When I wrote Campus CEO, I came across some incredible stories of young entrepreneurs innovating in the marketplace. And I remember coming across two young men in Texas. I think they went to Texas Tech out in Lubbock, Texas. They taught me a lesson that I now call the bait and switch. The bait and switch says, well, so I want to start a real estate company. Like I want to do real estate, but I don't have enough money to get into the real estate game. Mm-hmm. Is there something else I can do that can get me some traction, get me some money, get me some capital? And so what these young men did was they DJ'd all through college. They did parties, they bought the equipment, that was accessible to them. They could afford the equipment, they could do the DJ. They made decent money and they saved it all. Mm-hmm. And when they graduated from college, rather than go interviewing for a job, they took all the money they made from DJing and bought their first property in real estate, and then stayed in the real estate game for the early part of their career. So the bait was DJing, and probably most people saw them DJing like, oh, that's real cute. You throwing parties, you out there mixing and scratching. But those cats were serious about what they were going to do with that DJ money, and now they're running a real estate management company predicated on the bait of DJing to the switch into real estate.
I like it. They had a goal for their money, even though they didn't start out doing real estate. They started out DJing. I like that.
Yeah. It was a great lesson from those young men.
Yes, it is. Great advice for many people to do. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all of the advice that you provided all of us today. I know I learned something from listening. So thank you very much. And we hope you have a wonderful day.
You too, Brittany. Thank you. Appreciate you and your voice. God bless you.
Thank you. That was wonderful information from Dr. Pinkett. I truly left inspired after listening to you, Monica, Lynette, and Dr. Pinkett today. You guys really are wonderful. I love how Dr. Pinkett said, if you want to get started in creating your own business, you don't even need a lot of capital. He said when he began his first business, he had less than 1,000, and look into what it grew into. I mean, honestly, that is so inspiring, because I know a lot of people, when you think about paying down a debt, many people say, well, in the income that they currently have, they don't have the funds to really pay down the debt. And so one way is really to get another stream of income in order to help them meet whatever those financial goals are. So I really appreciate what he mentioned.
Yeah, I like that he said you have to spend less than you earn. So, it's important to know how much you have, right?
Absolutely.
That goes back to where you are and where you have to start.
Yeah, and also the aspect of having a team. And even if you don't have a team, I also think a good support system.
Well, that's a team, in my
Yeah,
opinion, right?
yeah.
So, your team can be business partners like he was talking about, or your team can be, I think it's important to have professional teams because, you have your cousins, brothers, sisters, mama, whatever, but you need some professional guidance. And, of course, you can get a financial advisor like me, depends on where you are in life, but everyone can access D-Free for free. And it's extremely professional. I am impressed every day. I'm impressed with the information they offer. And it's, hey, go to www.mydfree.org. And they have so much information about where to start. And it starts with you deciding that, hey, my short-term goal for today, is to do something about reaching my short-term and my long-term goals. So
I love that. So thank you for that URL. I want to let everybody know that the URL is also in the chat, and I also have it in the description section, which is right underneath this video. So if you want the link, it is there as well. And also in both sections, I want to let you know if you're interested in connecting with a Prudential financial advisor, like Monica, we have a survey there, and please fill out the survey, and then your information will be sent over to Prudential, and then they will be able to connect with you afterwards. So thank you very much. And thank you, Monica, for all of the advice that you have given today. Is there anything that you would like to add before we go about the process of creating short and long-term financial goals and achieving them?
I always have these, my daughter calls them mama-isms. Cheap people pay the most and lazy people work the hardest. So don't be lazy, get started now, and you won't have to work as hard in the future. Cheap people pay the most. Like, hey, I don't want to start saving because I can't start saving. You cannot afford not to start saving. You really can't. And so in the long run, if you don't, you'll be paying a lot more than you wouldn't than you need to, put it that way. Take those short-term goals and congratulate yourself, but you have to have long-term goals to help you feel that you've made some progress, because everyone has potential to do just a little bit better than they are. Life throws a lot of curveballs at us. Earlier on, Brittany, you had mentioned, just different goals, but it's not, or challenges, I should say, but it's not if something's going to go wrong, it's really when something's going to run. So that there's going to be a financial challenge. You might not know when it is, but be prepared for it. Make that one of your short-term goals. I'm going to be prepared for the next financial situation. Okay. And I wish everyone the best of luck. Reach out, get some help, but start today with that short-term goal, and don't make that long-term goal. Don't limit yourself, make it lofty and use the short-term goals to get you there.
I wanted to reference what you mentioned earlier. When you're creating your goals, think about yourself, your grown self, so that you can look back.
Old Brittany, right? Yes. Old Brittany and old Monica, because we are going to meet them one day. I mean, even if it's tomorrow. But I'm looking forward to a very good conversation with young Monica. I'm going to tell her, it's like, Monica, you listened, you took advice, you really worked hard to take care of old Monica. And oh, Lord knows how much I appreciate it. I hope you have the same good conversation with your old self too, Brittany.
Thank you. Thank you. Well said, wise words. Thank you, Monica, for so much. Thank you for all that you shared this morning. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm So honored.
Well, coming up in the next week of Disrupting the Wealth Gap Part 5, we are going to sit down with Joseph Samples, and he is going to describe how you can manage your large inheritance and maximize it, and really make sure that if you receive a large amount of money or if you receive a large inheritance, that you don't squander it and that you find the best way to maximize those funds. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.